Hannah, let's come sing. Oh, the people in the front never got the offering plates. Oh, Charlotte, encore. Encore, they didn't get an offering plate up here. You can do it while we're singing. Okay, let's sing.
Which one?
When we all get to heaven, is that okay?
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I was thinking when
Shape note kind of song, and have you
I
and
thought about that.
Tara do a
Yeah.
dueling,
Oh well.
or we could do dueling hallelujah.
I don't know how. Oh yeah, dueling hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I will win this. When Miss Lydia was teaching about loving everyone biblically, it made me think of when we all get to heaven. That's when it will happen, right? 5:33. Hope everybody got a Diet Coke or whatever your preference was, and you're ready to sing and sing about it. When we'll be perfected and not having to worry about eating 3 caramels. Did anybody eat all 3 caramels? Do you need a insulin shot? That's what you should have asked. Who has an insulin shot in their purse? Who's ready for when somebody... Those were delicious. So good. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus. Sing His mercy and His grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, He'll prepare us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sign. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of Him in glory will the trials of life repay. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing, rejoicing that will be. See Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Onward to the prize before us, soon His beauty will behold. Soon the pearly gates will open, we shall tread the streets of gold. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Nice parts too. Very pretty. It sounded so good. Are we doing another one?
Yes.
Okay.
Piano band's about to
Uh-oh.
in the love of the Lord.
All right. I think to also accomplish what Miss Lydia talked about, we need just a little closer walk with Thee. 279. You got a video? She's got it. She's on it.
Okay.
Do you want her up here, you said? I think she wants you maybe to do a group. I was thinking the same thing. I thought, where is the rest of the song? We can pick another one. It's below the 3rd verse.
Oh, you might want to explain that, because I'm like, where?
The chorus is written below the 3rd verse, in case you don't know it. Hopefully we know this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that smart. I was kind of smart. Sorry. I wasn't getting sassy. Are you ready? Sure. Oh, see, that's when you need someone who gets paid. This is 4 times, so don't mess me up because I know my cross. I am weak. Yeah, because we got to get a little jazzy. Letting them sit for a minute and breathe. All right. There's another one, a little chorus that my dad played for him that they should do. No? Yes. It's just practice it. Yeah. We can do it tomorrow. Sure.
Sorry. No, what? We can teach it to them. You can teach me tonight, and then we'll teach them tomorrow. Your dad is famous for. Oh, you can play this, Leah.
He believes in you. He believes in me more than I believe in myself. I love hearing you guys sing. Just so you know, you ladies sing. It's one of my favorite things, honestly. I'm not going to embarrass you guys. I promise. But the kitchen ladies rarely ever get to come over here. They just work, and whenever I offer them to, they say, it's okay, we just want somebody else to get a blessing, blah, blah. And so it worked out that they could come, and so that's why I moved them up here, and I just want them to be, as my husband would say, near the spout where the glory pours out. So I want them to be up here. Check one, am I on? She's asking if I'm on. Well, I really want to sing a different song for you. I really don't want to sing at all, but I feel like the Lord told me to. Sometimes he's like, Leah, that wasn't me. Just so you know. But before I do, I want to sing a little bit of Did I Mention? I know that so many of you know that, so I know it's not really a congregational song, but who knows the song Did I Mention That I Love Him? I just feel, would you sing it with me? If you know it. If you don't know it, fake it till you make it. Or come in on the chorus. David sang the praises of the glory of Jehovah. Paul preached that all is lost save knowing Christ. Little John said he is precious by leaning on his bosom. So for a moment may I humbly testify. You know the chorus. Did I mention that I love him? How I worship and adore him. When I can see no way, he makes a way. And did I mention he's been faithful to every promise he ever made me? I love him, that's all I want to say. How many sermons can be preached about this Jesus? How many songs can be sung about God's Son? Now there are not enough words, enough notes in the music to tell the story of all the Savior has done. And did I mention that I love him? How I worship. He makes a way. And did I mention he's been faithful to every promise he ever made me? I love him, that's all I want to say. We're going back to faithful. Did I mention he's been faithful to every promise he ever made me? I love him, that's all I want to say. All right. I was going to sing another song, but I think that's fine. That's good enough. We can leave it at that. Mindy, would you like? I'm going to go.
I'll put that down there for later. Put this down here. Put that down there. Hello, everyone. When Leah told me that, and that she wanted me to teach on unconditional love for your family. I just feel like I'm the worst person to teach that. I started thinking about Preston. Those of you that don't know, my son Preston died in 2004 of a drug overdose. And the devil tries to make you think that you're the worst parent in the world. And why are you up here? And I wouldn't normally brag on my kids, but I started thinking about a letter that Stephen gave me the first Mother's Day after Preston died. And I just want to read, like I said, I normally wouldn't brag on my, but when the devil makes you think you're the worst person, and I made every mistake that you can make, but he left me this with a bunch of candy and stuff, you know. All the stuff he knew I liked, Cheerios and candy and popcorn. But he said, said, Mom, I wish there was some way I could show you how much I appreciate you. I don't think there's any words that could express it. I know there has never been a person on this world that loves me as much as you do. That was before he met Kendra. But at the same time, you've been a friend of me, a true friend of me. I know that preachers say you're not supposed to be buddy-buddy with your children, but I enjoy telling my peers that my mother and me have a true friendship. I feel like I can go to you with anything, and as a result, you know more about me than anyone, and you still love me more than anyone. None of us are perfect, but I know that I speak not only for myself, but for Preston and Joseph also when I say that you have done nothing but love us our whole lives. I know that Preston's life was hard for the last few years, but he knew he had a mother and father that loved him, and I know he felt the warmth of that love in your home. That's why he came out so often. Even when we weren't there, he knew there was a shelter in the storm at our house, and that came from godly parents that loved him. And like I said, I don't deserve that, but I think God reminded me of that letter today to help me do this. And I have so much I'd like to say to you all, and I'm going to try to stick to my notes, but you know me once I get up here. Unconditional love. To love unconditionally is to decide to love someone regardless of any circumstances about them and to keep loving them no matter what they do. It means acting kindly even when someone doesn't deserve it. Unconditional love depends on the giver's commitment, not the qualification of the recipient. To love someone unconditionally, you can't be at the whims of your moods or feelings in a moment. If you don't feel loving but act loving, it's unconditional love. Paul described the unconditional love of God in Romans 8:38 through 39. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things to come, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Then we have our perfect example of unconditional love in Romans 5:8. But God commended his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, who died? Christ died for us, didn't he? I got a Band-Aid on my licking finger, so I'm in trouble. So, conditional love. Now I told you what unconditional love, so let's talk about conditional love. Conditional love can be defined as just that, love with conditions. This means that your love for another person or another person's love for you is contingent on certain actions or things going on. Now, I read all different kinds of things when I was studying about this. I read Christian stuff, I read non-Christian stuff. And I found this one thing about signs of conditional love, that maybe your parents loved you with conditional loves. And they had these. And when I read this, I got really convicted because I thought, boy, I sure do hope my boys can answer yes to some of these questions. Number one, you feel drained and beaten down after seeing your parents. You never felt like you were good enough as a child or even now as an adult. Your parents rarely beamed with pride over your accomplishments. They downplay your achievements. They openly reject you in front of others. They feel they don't see the adult version of you, and you dread expressing yourself or talking openly with your parents. I read those because if you've got young children, maybe you can think about those things about your children. I was just talking to a really good friend the other day, and she said, I never was good enough for my mom. Nothing I did was ever good enough for my mom. Now, there are effects of conditional love, okay? I'm talking about conditional love, not unconditional love. In many cases, children whose parents who loved conditionally experience lower self-esteem and feelings of self-worth. They also end up feeling sad or even depressed because they live their lives based on earning others' affections, not based on what interests them or makes them happy. But the most terrible thing is that it can affect their view of God. They spend the rest of their life always thinking, doubting their salvation, thinking He's not pleased with them, and there's nothing that they can do to please God, because that's how it's been with their parents. What causes us to love conditionally? Possessiveness and selfishness. We're needy. We need our children to do what we want them to do, or our husbands too. It can be our husbands, so we can be happy. If they do what we want, then we'll be happy. That means they love us. But our children and our husbands should not be responsible for our happiness.
Right.
We need to find our own happiness in the Lord.
Right.
They're not, it's too much of a load to put on them.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're just control freaks. Yep, that's me. Stubbornness. My way is always the best way. Our identity. Stephen's been talking a lot about identity lately. We put our identity in everything. What we do, who loves us, who doesn't love us. Our identity shouldn't be in our children or our husband. Our identity as Christians, we love the Lord. That's where our identity should be. We have expectations for our children, what we want for them. Some of those things are good, but we want to protect them and fear. Even when you're a parent of adult children and they make decisions, you're afraid because you've done that. And it's hard to keep your mouth shut and not say anything. Some parents hold money over their kids. You're like, I'll give you this money if you do what I want you to do. So now I think one of the biggest things that in our circle is peer pressure. Now, we always talk to our children about peer pressure, but we put peer pressure on each other. A lot of the things that I demanded of my boys were done because I was afraid of what others would think. And we have to be careful about that. These are our children to raise, and we don't need to put pressure on everybody else about what they're doing for their children.
Right.
And pride. Our love should be a no strings attached love. Our children and our husband do not have to be our puppets and doing what we want so we can have pride. Like if they wear a brown suit with their purple tie. My Sunday school class knows what I'm talking about. Now Mike comes in and I had we never match. And somebody gave me a new purple kind of top and I laid him out a purple tie. But the only mistake was that I left out the brown suit and the gray suit coat. And he wore the brown suit coat. So I'm teaching in Sunday school and I look out of the corner of my eye and he's walking up to get coffee and I said, oh no, he wore the brown coat. So I said, I'm not going to say anything. And I never did say anything to him. So, but we have pride, don't we? And like I said a while ago about protection, the fear over their future. And you know what? Some of it's just plain old ignorance. And when I mean ignorant, I mean we don't know. Nobody taught me. We didn't have ladies' meetings when I was a young mother. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have Focus on the Family or James Dobson or anything. And our churches didn't teach us. So a lot of times we just don't know. And it's generational. That's how our parents did it. That's how we do it. Okay? Okay, I want to say one thing. Now I'm going to go back to unconditional love. And I feel like I always have to say this. I'm talking about unconditional love for your parent, for your children and your husband. Unconditional love doesn't mean that if you're I don't want you to think that I'm telling you if you're suffering some kind of abuse that you put up with that. I'm not saying that, please. You go to somebody that knows a lot more than me and get counsel. Please don't go away and say, Miss Betty says I have to unconditionally love you. No, please, I'm not saying that, in case you get confused. But like I said, unconditional love isn't controlling, and it's not dependent or conditioned by something else. Now I'm going to spend more time on this one about what unconditional love isn't. Because a lot of people, I didn't realize till I looked unconditional love on the internet how controversial it is among Christians. But a lot of the reason is because they think that if you tell people that God's love is unconditional, then they can do whatever they want to do, and it doesn't matter. And that's not what I mean. But one of the biggest thing about unconditional love is not enabling, okay? Enabling is to enable inadvertently, is to inadvertently reinforce an undesired behavior. Now, we all do this to some degree because it's only natural to want to shield our children from pain, fear, failure, difficulty, and embarrassment. And this applies to our husbands, too. Now, here's some signs. Who is it that says, you might be an enabler if you are doing these things? No, signs that you might be enabling not just your children, but your husband. You find yourself speaking for your loved one. You're constantly intervening on your loved one's behalf. You make excuses for their behavior. You cover for them when they do wrong to make sure it stays hidden. You do things for them because it's easier, faster than showing them how to do it for themselves. You handle their responsibilities. Now, I will say this. I got this from a site that was talking about drug addiction, okay? I just took it to anything in our lives, okay? Any problem. You feel like your loved one isn't taking action, so you do it for them. You feel guilty when you say no, and you give second, third, fourth, and so on chances. You just have to seek the Lord's wisdom in this, you know. It doesn't do any good to keep covering up for them. But all the articles that I read, secular and religious, agree that there has to be boundaries. You can't just unconditionally love people without some kind of boundaries, especially your children. Love and discipline are not conflicting. They are two complementary and necessary aspects of training. Does God love us unconditionally? But does he let us have free rein and do whatever we want? No. Hebrews 12:6 says, for whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. If you endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with son. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? Now, this is a statement that Stephen has made, and I wish somebody had told me this when my children were little. I did not realize this. Discipline is not punishment for past sins. Discipline is training for future living. And I'm afraid that I didn't know that, and I punished my children. I was not always nice. I was angry sometimes. So, anyway, we've got to have boundaries. You've got to set clear expectations and boundaries. And boundaries and balance are necessary to love unconditionally without enabling. You got that? Now, this is not easy to teach, okay? A lot of this is countercultural, controversial even, but. So, how do you show God's love to your family? I've got a few things I want to talk to you about that. Kendra, at our last ladies' meeting, was teaching on Titus 2:4, and I became very convicted. It's bad when your daughter-in-law makes you feel convicted. But she pointed out something, and I did some studying. Titus 2:4, the aged women likewise, that they be in behaviors becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children. Teach them, Paul said, to love. So that tells you right then if they had to be taught, it was something they weren't doing or it was hard to do. But I didn't realize this. Okay, everybody knows the 4 main Greek words, right, for love. Eros, which is sexual, intimate love, which, by the way, is not used in the Bible. I mean, seriously, it's not. Storge, I can't say it right. I'm not a Greek scholar. Family love. Philia, which is friendship love. Agape, which is sacrificial love. With the phrase, to love their husbands, the Greek word for love their husbands is philandros. To love their children is philotechnos. Philotechnos, which is child lover. And both of these words, philandros and philotechnos, whatever, they occur nowhere else in the New Testament. That's the only time they're used, these 2 times. Both of these words originate from philos, friend, to be friendly to one, wishing well, a positive feeling of liking. Philia is the Greek word used to describe deep, meaningful friendships. Don't go to sleep, okay? This goes much deeper than simply acquaintances. Philia love binds 2 people together and holds them through thick and thin. Philia friends are faithful, staying close to you in your best moments and your worst. I read somewhere that the Greeks held more prestige. They liked the philia love better than any, that it was the most important love. The word philandros, husband lover, it doesn't carry with it the physical, romantic, sexual aspect of love that's often so front and center in today's marital expectations. Romantic love is certainly, don't take me wrong, it's an important aspect of marriage. I'm not here to teach you about that, of the marriage bond. Thank God. But that was not the emphasis that Paul intended when he delivered in Titus 2 directive on love and marriage. His language instead conveys the idea of being a friend to our husbands and our children, being fond of them, acting affectionately toward them, treating them with our utmost devotion, liking them. Why did Paul use that kind of love? I'll tell you a little background here. Paul was writing to Titus in Crete, right? Crete was under Roman rule and dominated by a very pagan culture. Cretans worshiped Greek gods and believed many of them were actually born there. The chief god was Zeus, who was allegedly buried there. So it was considered to be like the central place of the worship of the gods. But this mythology, now I want you to think while I'm talking about this and apply it to today's world, okay? Why we still need to teach this. The mythology was so entrenched in Cretan culture that the churches in Paul's day were integrating their understanding of our Christian God with the prevailing views about the Greek gods. They were just like combining them, mainly Zeus. The influence of false gods and false doctrine led to many believing Christians to accept misguided notions of what manhood and womanhood ideally should be. Like I said, it kind of reminds you today, don't it? In Paul's day, men and women were saved out of a culture where romantic love usually did not exist in marriages. Marriages were often arranged, and wives were only seen as the trusted keepers of the home and bearers of the children. Emotional love, psychological needs, and sexual desires were satisfied outside of the marriage by most husbands. Now, this was when the church, this is what they were going into, okay? The opportunities for illicit sex in the Roman world were endless. Kind of reminds you today, right? There is also historical evidence that tells us the emergence of behaviors among women that were contrary not only to godliness, but even to what traditional or unbelieving Romans viewed. So these women were acting in ways that even the unbelieving Romans didn't agree with. Women were prioritizing their own pleasures above everything else, which resulted in promiscuity, adultery, and an abandonment of their domestic responsibilities with their families. Now, if they were surrounded by these influences, it's easy to see how the believers in Crete would have been tempted to stray from God's design for wives and mothers. Now, when they got saved, when the men were getting saved, it stopped the immorality in most of the believers' men, their lives. But salvation did not make them or their wives instantly close. That doesn't mean their wives are just going to trust them after all that they've done. And as it is now, it's easy to let fatigue and burdens inside and outside weigh us down, doesn't it, girls? Things weigh us down. And we become exhausted. We can become exhausted and disappointed about things our husband's done. And before we know it, we're unfriendly, right? We turn unfriendly toward our husband and our children. Our attitude, every woman in here, your attitude can affect your whole family. We've all heard the old saying, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And that's true. Why is it that we can control our friendliness with our friends and even complete strangers, but be unfriendly in our home? I tell you, it takes more than romance and excitement of young love to enable a wife to love her husband for a lifetime. Someday that's going to be gone. If you live long enough, that part of marriage won't be there anymore. That is why Paul urged that the aged women, and I want to say this right now, I'm running out of time already, that the aged women should, you might say, well, am I an aged woman? How old do you have to be an aged woman? Instead, you should say, who am I older than? There's always somebody younger than you that you can influence. Now, Kendra pointed this out, and I was so convicted. We've heard it over and over, and if I have ever said it to any of you, I'm sorry. You don't have to like them, you just have to love them, honey. How many times have we heard, you don't have to like them, you just have to love them? And I'm sorry if I ever said that, but it's not true. God wants us to like our families. Now, I know from a human perspective that none of us can practice 100% conditional love, but we can look to our perfect example, Jesus. He says in John 13:34, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. Now, I don't even have near enough time because I've talked too much. I want to do a couple of comparisons here. Old Testament love. Everybody knows, somebody knows, I know my Sunday school class knows, Hesed love. Have you ever heard of Hesed love? That's the Hebrew word. It's used in the Old Testament. It appears about 250 times. Psalms 36:7, how excellent is thy loving kindness. That's Hesed. Psalms 23:6, surely goodness and mercy. That's Hesed. Many biblical words such as mercy, compassion, love, grace, and faithfulness relate to the Hebrew word Hesed. But nobody can really put a concept to it, really describe it. It's not merely an emotion or a feeling, but involves action on behalf of someone who's in need. It surpasses ordinary kindness and friendship. It is the message of the gospel, God's act of forgiveness and salvation in Jesus, is rooted in Hesed. It's just amazing, God's Hesed love for us in the Old Testament. That's how they describe his love in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, what do you think it is? Who knows it? Agape love, right? Agape is the most powerful and highest form of love in the New Testament. Although the word is rarely found in ancient Greek literature, agape and its verb form agapeo appear around 200 times in the New Testament. It was developed almost exclusively in Christian literature to refer to the kind of love that doesn't serve itself, but extends itself for the sake of another and their welfare, even if to do so requires sacrifice. Agape is the love of choice. It's unconditional. It's sacrificial. It loves when it's not always convenient and when it's not reciprocated. It says, I love you when you're not very lovable. It extends to both the deserving and the undeserving. Perfect example, John 3:16, right? For God so loved, that's agape, the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting love. That phrase, so loved, represents agape love. Now, another conviction I got this month was when Blake preached. And he got to Luke chapter 6. And I'm not going to read it all to you. I'll just read you 3 of the verses. Verse 27, or part of them, 32 and 35. But I say unto you which hear, love your enemies. Do good to them which hate you. For if you love them which love you, what think of you? For sinners also love them that love those that love them. But love your enemies and do good and lend, hoping for nothing. Again, all those loves is agape love. Jesus says you're not just supposed to force a smile and mind your own business when somebody hates you or mistreats you. You are actively trying to do good to them. Unconditional love requires sacrifice. And if Jesus directed us to love our enemies, now here's what got me when Blake was doing that. If he wants us to love our enemies and do this for them, how much more important it is for us to do that to our families. If we're supposed to love our enemies and do good to them with hate you, well, what's he expect us to do to our families? You spoke on it, I think, forgiveness. Didn't you mention forgiveness? Forgiveness. You have to have forgiveness in your family. Qualities of agape love is found in 1 Corinthians 13. Charity suffereth long. Each time, this is speaking about agape. The charity is agape, okay? Charity suffereth long. Be patient with your family. And is kind. Be kind. Charity envieth not. Do not be jealous. Charity vaunteth not itself. Do not be boastful. Is not puffed up. Don't be proud. Doth not behave itself unseemly. Do not be rude. Seeketh not her own. Do not look out for your interest only. Is not easily provoked. Do not get angry with them easily. Thinketh no evil. Do not keep score of their wrongs. Rejoiceth not in iniquity. Do not be happy when bad things happen to them, but rejoiceth in truth. Be full of joy. Beareth all things. Protect them. Believeth all things. Trust them. Hopeth all things. Have hope for them. And endureth all things. Never give up. And once again, if these are things we're supposed to do for others, we should do these for our family. Apply these to our family. You know, in the Old Testament, as in the New Testament, God is a God of love, compassion, mercy, kindness, and goodness. The attributes described in the word hesed, and I wish I had more time to go into that, but I had to skip over most of that, apply within the context. The Hesed Old Testament, Jesus took the Hesed Old Testament and the Agape New Testament, and he combined them. They're one. And it's impossible for us to love perfectly. But Jesus did, didn't he? He fulfills the requirements of both of those loves. His sacrifice on the cross. Now, agape love does not come naturally to us in our sinful state. And as it's been pointed out already today, if you've not accepted the Lord as your Savior, you can't do this without Him. That's the first step. The rest of it's wasted if you don't do that. But by drawing closer to Him, like you said, learning more about and experiencing His love, we can begin to understand what this real love means. Only through Jesus can we show and experience Hesed and agape love. One more biblical thing. The one another's. You quoted my favorite one. Do you know there's 59 one another's in the New Testament? 33% of them have to deal with loving one another. 33% of them have to do with being unified, having unity one with another. 15% of them have humility toward each other, and encouraging others is 29% of them. And she quoted Ephesians 4:32, and be ye kind. I could do it like we did it. And be ye kind one to, no, I won't do it. And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. What better place do we have to practice the one another's in our own homes? Now, I think I'm okay, but I forget now. I'm almost done. Forgot. I got too excited. Okay. How can we practice unconditional love? First of all, pray for wisdom. Now, I was going to tell you back here on enabling, but I didn't have time to talk to you but when Preston was a teenager, now, anybody that knows us knows that Preston was a wonderful teenager. People at Maranatha. Preston didn't get into the drugs until he got hurt playing football at Cumberland College, and his friends got him pain med. And my family has a long line of addiction in our family, and he got addicted. But when he was a teenager, when he first started becoming a teenager, I thought, how in the world am I going to handle this? And I prayed. And God gave me this verse, James 3:17 and 18. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy, and the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. I took that verse and I put it on my window, and I tried to deal with him. Now, I was a little bit different than a lot of moms, and I get a lot of conflict and controversy when I say this. I allowed my boys a little leeway with me in the home. They're out in public all the time. Sometimes they need to talk. Sometimes they need to vent. And I always told them, I'll put up with a certain amount of it as long as you're respectful to other adults. And you ladies can vouch for me that my boys were. But I did. They were not mean to me. They did not call me names. But if they snapped at me or just something little, I didn't go to pieces on them. I tried to deal with them that way. That was my way of doing it. That might not be your way of doing it, but that was my way of doing it. I prayed for wisdom, and God gave me that. I got to have an Elizabeth Elliot quote. I wouldn't be speaking without Elizabeth Elliot quote, right? She said, I believe that trust in God, love for one's children, and prayer for wisdom are a recipe for successful parenthood, far more reliable than all the books and seminars in the world. Yeah. You ask the Lord, He'll show you. If you don't feel peace about something, don't do it. I did have a very dear friend that's daughter was into drugs. She talked to me one day, and she was crying. She said, I don't think the Lord wants me to help her anymore. Now, Mike's dad always said, if God brings you to tears about something, you better listen to him. But you know what? She couldn't deal with it. She just couldn't deal with it. She had to help her daughter, and I won't even tell you the results. But you ask God, and if you've got peace, they're your children. I'm not trying to tell you how to raise your children. But anyway, first of all, pray for wisdom. Tell your children you love them. Touch them, hug them, love on them. Even Stephen sometimes, he's my pastor, I'll walk up and give him a hug because, you know, he's still my baby. Teach them who they are in God's eyes and help them cultivate the gifts God has given them. Spend time with them. Turn your phone off and spend some time with them. Listen to them. Really listen to them. Learn what they're interested in, even if it's not what you had planned for them. When you find God's gifts for them, what God is, God's given us all gifts. And listen to them. Be kind to them. And I wish I could tell you guys, I'm an expert at this, I did all these things. No, I didn't. Learn to separate the behavior from the child. and make sure to criticize the behavior and not the child. You dummy, how many times are you going to do this? You've got to criticize the behavior and not the child. Now, I got two challenges to give you. One of these I heard on Revive Our Hearts. Some of y'all might have heard about it. It's called the 30-Day Husband Encouragement Challenge. The challenge has two parts. For the next 30 days, don't say anything negative about your husband to him or anyone else. Okay? Each day for the next 30 days, tell your husband something you admire about him or appreciate about him and say it to someone else about him. That's just a challenge. I listened to the testimonies of the women that did this. There were some women whose marriages were already in the procedures of divorce, and God turned it around. Then I found this cute little 30-day mom challenge, and it's got different. Day 1, ask your child what is one thing we can do together this month. 2, kiss your children while they're asleep. Just different things like that. There's 30 days, and I actually printed off 210 copies of things. So I'm going to lay some up here and some in the back if you want one, if you want to give it to somebody, you know. But it's just a challenge, okay? I thought it would give you some ideas. So anyway, like I said, I'm not an expert on this at all, but I do know that the Lord, and I never want any of you to go away and say, she always makes us feel so guilty. I'm not trying that. But somebody came along and started teaching me. If somebody doesn't exhort you and teach you and challenge you, and you can pray about it and ask the Lord what he'd have you to do. Thank you very much.